by G Media. On today's episode, we're joined by a legend in her own right. Well, maybe not legend, but she definitely is a doctor, a Ph.D. doctor in data analytics, political science. And she's here today to talk to us about what the difference between is data scientists and developers. So let's get to it here on the Big 3 Me podcast, powered by G Media. Welcome back to the Big 3 and Me. I'm your host, Akil Patterson. I'm here with Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy from New York University, NYU. I don't know what their mascot is, and so I'm just going to say, go New Yorkers.
Nice. I'll take it. We could use a little encouragement these days. I think it's the Bobcat, but I only know that because someone recently texted me to say he found that out. And I was like,
so
right.
The NYU Bobcats, and
yeah.
I know they're Division III athletics. So, and the only reason I know that is because they do have a wrestling program there.
Oh, okay. Is it any good? I guess if it's D3, it's not.
I mean, it's if it's D3 in New York, it means you guys well, where do they practice at?
Central Park. I don't know.
Everything in New York is expensive.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
But
yeah, I think we all just fight each other trying to get on the subway, and that counts as our wrestling team.
Oh goodness, great. Well, listen, hey, as long as they're not fighting too much, I'm all for it. So thank you for joining us, Andrea. And most of my audience won't know that, we grew up in the same town.
Yes.
Your family, I have immense respect for your father because I used to always want to be you guys when he would go and film some random documentary in the Sudan or in Africa. And I'm like, I wish I was his kid.
Oh,
he takes them to some of the cool places. I'm like, Dad, why don't we go somewhere? My dad's like, oh, I'm taking you to this construction site down the street.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to spend your summers, big guy. So, well,
to be fair, Frederick was a real hub of construction for some time. So you really had your pulse on the growth of the mid-Atlantic. But
yeah,
I only went to construction sites when we were not supposed to. And we would kind of, stroll through because we didn't have anything to do in our hometown. So we'd go to construction sites and climb around and get tetanus and stuff.
I don't know, but I never got tetanus, but I did get a couple tetanus shots.
Yeah. I have a permanent supply here, just left over from those days.
Right on. So yeah, and not only that, you've gone on and had this wild kind of interdisciplinary career. And when I say wild, it's like performance art, creator, data analytics scientist, political science, if there was that one of these things ain't like the other kind of mantra I could use right now, it's like your career makes my career look like, well, at least Akil is going in a similar direction.
Yeah. The arrows are kind of trending in the same direction. Yeah, it's confusing, I have to say. And give yourself some credit. I feel like it's more interdisciplinary maybe than you are giving yourself.
But tell us about this wild journey from, undergrad, performance art, and even getting your doctorate in political science. It just seems like they didn't mesh together, but really they've kind of helped achieve your goals of kind of opening your mind to different things.
Well, thanks. And congrats on a thorough rundown. Sometimes I come on podcasts and people are like, you're all over the place. Explain yourself to everybody. So I appreciate you doing the heavy lifting. So I went to grad school straight out of undergrad, mainly because I didn't know what I was doing. And a PhD, I very barely got in. I just sort of stumbled in and didn't know what I was getting into. And it turned out to be very quantitative. And I was not, I don't know. I guess we were just talking, we were in different years, but I avoided math at our high school at all costs. I avoided science. I took the basic, barely, I got to college and I was like, I'm never writing an equation ever again. And so it's just essays and all this. I get to this PhD program in political science, and it turns out it's all statistics, all game theory, all math. And I only out of I think it was like out of insecurity. I was like, I'm going to stay. I'm going to get through this because I want to prove that I can do it. And so I was sort of force-fed math, and I've since come to appreciate it quite a bit. But all the while, the only thing that kept me sane and gave me any sense of self-esteem was movement and performance. And so I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so I would go to Detroit a lot, where there was quite a rich art scene. And I would also travel to New York or other places during the summers. And I did improv comedy and stand-up comedy, and circus is ultimately where I landed in terms of probably the part that fits the least into the broader narrative. And since then, I've just been sort of meandering in between, academia, real world consulting, feeling sorry for myself, back to academia. So only recently have I come to, I'll stop this essay in a moment. Only recently have I come to accept the multiple identities. I used to just spend all my time, I don't know if you've been there, agonizing why I couldn't just pick one. And I would try to go all in on one and realize I was bored, or I was listless, or I was unhappy. And so it's ultimately more of what my advisor would call a churning equilibrium to just keep myself like regulated, I would say.
I bounced all over the world. I told my friends, like, I went from playing football to like, okay, I don't know what I want to do, so I'll go be a wrestling coach. And then I became an international wrestler, got another degree, then didn't know what I was going to do with myself still. Then I went to law school. So you're just like, oh, what am I going to do with myself? I don't know. I'll figure it out one of these days.
Yeah. And then something shows up and you're like, yeah, law school, fine. Why not?
Yeah. Shiny object over there,
exactly.
$100,000 wasted.
Right.
But you know what? I do it again in a heartbeat.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
Not the same mistakes. Just I do it all again in a heartbeat, like have the life again, not all the experiences. I don't know if I'd go to law school again. I mean, again, it's very expensive.
It also sounds hard. I knew some friends in law school when I was in my PhD program, and their lives didn't seem like a easy walk in the park to me.
Well, oftentimes your life is never easy the first go around. But again, if I could do it all over again, knowing what I know now, walk in the park. I'd avoid everybody in every hard situation. All right. So you go get this degree, this PhD, this doctorate in political science. You have some time as a stand-up comedian. You end up in the circus doing some performance art, which, by the way, I followed. I thought it was awesome.
Thank you.
You've got a little brother. Okay, we move on from that. I actually do know her little. I knew her little brother better because her little brother was a wrestler on my high school team. So that's kind of how we even know each other, folks. So it's weird, but it's not.
Yeah, it has the vibes of like it's 20 years later, or however, maybe not to age us, but it is. It's kind of like if you were to come over and hang out with Garrett, my brother. I'd be sort of like, hey, I know you, but I don't really know you. Like, I'm the older sister who's like too cool for this.
Yeah.
These two. But you're obviously way cooler than me, but it has that kind of energy.
Well, first off, I always thought I was like, man, these kids are way cooler than me. Their dad, I specifically remember when your dad took you guys to Africa.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Like, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, there's all these I'm like, this man took his children to Africa because he was shooting a documentary about something. And I assumed it was a documentary because I knew he made documentaries, but I just remember you guys going to Africa, and that was like so jealous.
Well, we should have brought you with us. Honestly, someone to diffuse. My brother and I were not good friends growing up. A third person to diffuse or be the ambassador between us would have certainly made my life easier. Probably would have made my dad's life easier. You could have sat in the middle so we wouldn't like poke each other and yell at each other. Like a beautiful trip to Africa. We went all around Southern Africa, ruined by sibling hatred.
I'm sure by the time you guys got back, he was just like, just get away from me. Just get far, far away from me.
Yeah. You're all going to college early. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, you know what? They're actually, one of our friends' moms did that to us too.
Really?
Jeff Fesser, his mom sent us back. She didn't have any right to send us back to college, but she sent all of us back to college. And I think her quote was, y'all got to leave Frederick. Y'all can't stay here. Y'all got to go back to school.
Wow.
Well, because, those summer, those Thanksgiving breaks and those winter breaks that last over a month.
Yeah. And you're like 19 and too overgrown to be like go back to your high school life. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're just spending all day. And thank God gas was cheap back then, because I would have, like, now I would have been like, oh, I got to stay home, or I got to walk to a friend's house. Or
right.
And e-bikes weren't cool. Yeah. E-bikes weren't cool. Although I now have 2 e-bikes. So.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
How very Portland of you.
Well, I got it back when I lived in Baltimore first. So, but okay, we've got to bring it back. All right. So
I'm here to talk about Jeff Fesser some more. That's a name I haven't heard. We took French together. He was a lot of fun.
He probably was hitting on you deep down inside.
I don't know.
It's how he rolled.
I wore a lot of overalls. I was pretty weird. I don't think anyone was hitting on me in high school.
You were class president.
I ran unopposed. I think we were just.
It's like nobody wants this job. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I was unopposed.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't put that on my college application. Didn't work out either way, but yeah.
It didn't get me into Dartmouth or Drexel or.
Nope.
I got into a state school. I always tell people, it's like, I got into state school. So you've traveled, you've gotten, yourself together, you're still into the performance, a professor at NYU, but now, I talk about blockchain technology. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show is because you had a TikTok.
All right.
And this goes out for all my devs out there, right? She is not a dev. Right? She does data science and data analytics. And there's a difference between being a dev, which is just a developer where you just know about coding, and using practical science analytics to decide if this development or project is right for an ecosystem. Right. Talk to these fans about, because again, many of them get into arguments with me because they're like, well, you're not a developer. And it's like, yeah, but I also recognize that data science is way different than what you guys are doing. And one of my big things is, I wear this shirt, racism of the public health crisis. People go, well, there's no data that proves it. And I go, there's tons of data that proves it. It's just that most people ignore it. And just recently, there was I think it was a senator who said, well, if you just took Black women out of the equation down in Louisiana, which happens also to be a place that is connected to you, but your brother's there. It's like, if we just took Black women out of this analytics, we'd be normal. And it's like, well, wait a second, that's data analytics, that's data science. And why is it important that we have to start looking at the scientific numbers and the data, as opposed to just like, well, no, we can just do this. We can just put these things in wherever we want, and that will make the numbers work out better. Right.
Yeah. The idea that one, what was that, a week ago, where they said, oh, we actually don't have any issues if you remove Black women from the data set. And you're like, that's the issue, is that there's a huge gap between the experiences of Black women and it was the health outcomes or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, my whole thing. So I don't pretend to be a computer scientist or, I'm not a developer, as you said at the start, but I occupy a space of data science. A lot of people have different ideas about data science, but I think the TikTok that you're referring to, or TikToks, is that I feel like every 3 days I have to go on there and just yell into, I'm not even talking to anyone in particular. I'm more just getting it out of my own system, because when I'm consulting and working with students and talking to whoever, everyone assumes that because I say I'm a data scientist, I'm a programmer and only a programmer, or that data science equals programming. So every semester I teach a course called Data Science for Everyone, and my students sign up thinking it's a programming course. And at the end of the semester, my main goal is to impart upon them that thinking about data and making use of data and being a data scientist is a lot more than just programming. Programming is a tool that helps us sift through lots of data or collect lots of data or simulate outcomes based on some data to make predictions. But we are also using the data, as you said, which is a whole separate entity. And the program is just the hammer, and the data is, well, what are we hammering together? And if your wood is rotten and your nails are rusty, then you have a crap program, no matter how good your hammer is. Now we're talking construction again, right? But the other piece of data science is what we can call it substantive expertise, and we could call it just kind of the science piece, which is being analytical, thinking about things like causal mechanisms and confounders and problems with your research design, where even if you have decent data and a good program, your inferences might be total crap because you're not actually thinking about it the right way, or you're missing some kind of, selection bias or confirmation bias, or, you're only looking at the evidence that supports your views and so on. So there's really three pieces in my mind of making sense of data. Like there's the program, but there's also the quality of the data itself, which almost everyone overlooks. And there's the inferences that you make afterwards to say, well, hang on, what did we learn? Was this a useful study? Are we missing something huge? Should we need to add something to this model? And so on.
So when you're looking at that stuff, and I know, like, so let's take Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk right now wants to buy Twitter. Mm-hmm. And he came out and he said, well, according to, their metrics, they grabbed this 100 Twitter accounts. Yeah. And then they will say, well, these 100 Twitter accounts will represent 5% of the entire population of Twitter. And it's like, but does that represent 5% of Twitter? Like, because it's like, well, those are the people that follow you, or those are the people that are like in your account. Mm-hmm. And would they even recognize my account or your account? I mean, would they?
I mean, his study is so flawed, and it's exactly the piece where the data is no good, because if it's a tiny sample size, there's no magic number after which your sample size is representative. It depends on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to understand and how different the different units are. But 100 is not enough in Twitter world. I don't know how many users there are on Twitter, but 100 is such a small percentage that there's no way you're getting a representative sample on that number alone. And then B, the selection bias. If he's only picking people he's either following or who are following, somehow these people are on his radar, right? There's no list out there that I know of everyone on Twitter. Maybe Twitter owns it, right? So that means he's only getting a sample of people who are connected to him in some way. And I'm thinking off the top of my head, but I could totally imagine. His point was to point out how many bots there were on Twitter, right? Yeah. I could imagine him being a target of bots in a way that I'm not, or most people on Twitter don't have bots following them or retweeting crypto points or Tesla stock prices or whatever else that he probably does. So it's a dreadful sample. And yes, you could do gymnastics in your programming to maybe you could bootstrap, which means like replicate the data set. And then you could maybe do some inferences where you downweight some stuff based on your assumptions about the world. But it's very clunky. It's very messy. And it almost certainly won't, quote, fix the problem. Like if you have bad data, it's going to be crap no matter what.
So what about, and this is like kind of like jumping from, okay, he's got bad data, or he might be given bad data, to what about those people who are developers who don't have any data and yet they try to make things equitable and fair? Because again, this is where I jump from, well, hey, everybody, like when you that old trick where you're like, hey, go to Google and type in smiling child. And then all the smiling children just happen to be like kids with like missing teeth and they're white. And you're like,
yep. With like chocolate frosting on their face.
Yeah. Like,
it's like a very suburban white in particular, but yes, they're all white.
You're like, well, why is this in here as smiling child? Like I've seen a lot of smiling children that have like from around the world. Why does it always seem to be based off of like one centralized population? Yeah,
it's amazing. I'm working on a training that I'm delivering tomorrow for one of my consulting clients on unconscious bias in performance review. So I do a lot of work in the people analytics space. So people try to go around and say, oh, okay, is this person a quote top performer or a high potential person? And they rate someone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and think that's objective. And so I go in and I'm like, well, it's not. All you've done is assigned your bias a number, right? And so I was just going through, the reason I bring all of this up is I was literally before our conversation going through a bunch of Google image searches just to find some, I'm not a good PowerPoint slide maker. So I was just trying to find some like generic images of like people at a desk and people having a meeting, and they were all white. And it's not, I mean, even if I was looking in the like unconscious bias image search, it's still all white people sitting around a room. And you're like, these of all people should know, or it's everyone's just sort of like a weird shade of pink. You're like, this is wild to me that we're still doing this.
It's like, so how do we get them to start recognizing there's data bias in kind of their coding and how they even look into coding? Yeah. Because again, a developer is creating based off of what they're coding. Mm-hmm. You're looking at saying, well, yeah, you can code whatever you want, but if you're biased in your coding because it's easier for you, right?
Right.
You just learned it like this.
Right.
Does it really help, or does more harm in terms of like outcomes?
Well, if you think of like let's do the Google image example, because I think that's a great one, is you Google image search, smiling kid or happy child or something. You get all these white kids grinning with, like a cute number of teeth missing in some kind of like mischievous way. And they're all kind of like very, very caricature. It's like, how did that get there? Right? Why is that the thing that shows up? Google doesn't have someone who's super biased sitting there and saying, I'm going to put only these blonde, freckled, toothless kids. It's because the developers who are building the algorithm that says, okay, what is a smiling kid, are working from the images that are available to them. And I don't know where they're getting the images. Either they're pulling from websites or they've built a scraper that they're familiar with, or more white people have access to the internet around them, or more, the bias that humans have is causing us to put some images on, say, our old Tumblr accounts or whatever. And so then the programmer is writing a program that itself is not inherently biased, but it's saying, it's a computer vision or machine learning, something like that. And it's saying, okay, here are a bunch of pictures of smiling kids. From now on, the next time someone types smiling kids or happy child or some synonym, produce something that looks like that. All we've done is trained the computer to recognize that smiling kid equals blonde, white, 6-year-old boy or something like that, right? And so because of the original availability of data that was a bunch of white people, probably because white people are more likely to be in Silicon Valley and have access to the internet in the United States and be posting their photos online or whatever, that meant that we're training the algorithm to just be as racist as we are. And you see all these horrible stories that come out too, where it's like the computer can't even recognize a Black child as a child, right? Or the facial recognition doesn't work as well, or Siri or Alexa don't work as well for voices that aren't sort of very, Midwest, Northern Ohio voices.
Oh
either.
My goodness. So when over the years, I've developed a small Baltimorean, twang to me, and Siri doesn't understand me.
Yeah.
Nor does Kaiser Permanente's voice recorder. It's like, yes.
Yeah.
Or water. And you're like, oh, that's not how you say it. I'm like, well, I keep saying water.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you think about you might say, if you're a developer listening, you say, well, who cares? It's slightly more inconvenient for Akil to use Siri than everybody else, but he's obviously doing fine. But the problem is that it's all very, very incremental challenges can make life way more difficult and can have outsized impact. So if you imagine that on average, a person with, say, a Southern accent or the Baltimore twang or whatever, right, is interacting with Siri, and even 1% of the time, it's frustrating enough that you're like, forget it. That kid, that adult gets to a point where they think, oh, well, technology is not for me, or I'm not really going to be involved in the tech space because when I interact with these phones, it's not recognizing my face. It's not understanding what I'm saying. Why am I going to bother being in this field? And it's one of the many contributors to why we maybe don't see non-majority folks even interested in tech, whether it's as a consumer or a hobbyist, never mind a career. And then there's the other examples that people cite all the time, but it's an important one, is the Amazon resumes example as well. Do you know this one?
Amazon resume? No, I'm not familiar with this one.
This is where one of the big things I also do with companies is go in and yell at them. They say, come in and evaluate our machine learning algorithm. And I say, all right. And I go in and I say, well, your data's crap, so I don't care what your algorithm is because you're building from something that's horrible, right? The Amazon example is they said, let's get rid of bias in hiring. So we're going to build a computer program to decide who to hire. And so what we're going to do is feed them a whole bunch of resumes of people who have succeeded in our company. So they're at the top, they're high salary, high ranking people. So feed them those resumes, and then computer program, find out other resumes that are similar to that one to predict future top talent, and we'll hire those people. Well, it turns out that all the people at the top of Amazon, whenever this happens, maybe 5-10 years ago, were straight white dudes who had gone to Harvard or Stanford or Swarthmore or whatever, and probably played lacrosse or hockey or a crew or something, right? They previously worked at Goldman Sachs. And so they just replicated the profile of who was in their C-suite. And that is a very, very biased sample because the fact that they got there is reflective of broad societal biases in the first place. So all we did was train this Amazon machine learning algorithm to look for more people with resumes like that, which is exactly what humans do, right? You read resumes, you look for those information shortcuts like, Ivy League school, impressive former companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, this makes more sense now why I was never getting these callbacks.
Well, there Amazon. You go. Yeah.
I'm good looking. I'm smart. I did I went to a state school, so I was automatically out.
Mm-hmm.
Man,
it's amazing how much it seems so obvious to me, but these huge companies who hire massive numbers of people every year, in the United States alone, never mind around the world, how they're still so swayed by these. Oh, they went to a top school. And as far as I can tell, more and more, going to a top school is a great piece of evidence to indicate how wealthy your parents are or where they went to school. I am increasingly of the view that it has almost nothing to do with your intellectual abilities, except maybe at the margins.
Well, you know what? Well, if it came down to it, my father went to Buffalo. My mother went to University of Maryland. I went to University of Maryland, and then,
Go Terps.
Yeah, go Terps, and then a state school, and then another state school.
Mm-hmm.
But like the most impressive thing on my resume is that I went to Washington University School in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And people were like, wow, that's a great school. And I was like, so all the other degrees just didn't mean shit.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're telling me? It's like, oh, these other degrees didn't, because I noticed now and later in my career, if somebody, because I get recruiters that come after me for things, they'll say, oh, we noticed that, you went to this prestigious law school. And it's like, but the other degrees didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like it's literally just saying, hey, like at least 8 years of your life was for crap.
Yeah.
These only 3 years are worth it.
Totally. Like, something similar for me is I got a postdoc right after my PhD. It's basically just you're an underpaid faculty member. And I taught at Carnegie Mellon for 2 years, which is the most impressive school on my resume.
In Pittsburgh.
In Pittsburgh, yeah. And I hated every second of it. I was like going through my own stuff anyway, but it was like I was very torn about whether I wanted to be in academia. I was trying to teach while finish my dissertation at the same time. I only got it because my advisor was friends with the director and I barely even applied. The whole thing was corrupt. It was terrible. I was miserable. You
admitted to your own corruption. It's like,
oh yeah,
it was 100%. The fix was it.
The nepotism beyond a doubt, but I feel like I'm doing it. I think maybe I am by bringing it up even here. But if I go into a room and I say, I'm introducing myself to a group of C-suite people or to my students today, I'm twice as old as these students and I still feel like I need to prove myself in this field. Right. And so I'll go out of my way to say, well, Carnegie Mellon. And they say, wow, Carnegie. Even though I have spent it's such a tiny moment in my life and I was as disengaged as you can be, but just having that name attached to it. I think, if I were applying to Amazon, I'd put that in big letters. Like Carnegie Mellon University's own Andrea Jones-Rooy is applying for this job.
You're like I spent 6 months there and I didn't even like it.
I hated it. I taught one class. Well, I taught for 2 years, but I was leaving all the time to go do circus and comedy. I spent, I would literally like pass through Pittsburgh, teach a class, and then just keep driving. It's horrible.
Oh man. When I lived in Pittsburgh, I had the same kind of feeling. It's like, this is when I was going to California University of Pennsylvania, but I'd go to Pittsburgh and I'd be like, oh, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And we're back in Frederick, Maryland.
Yep. Yeah. The only thing that worked out well is because I did grad school in Michigan and I would go to visit my parents in Frederick, and Pittsburgh was literally halfway between those places. So I would stop off, do my job, keep going.
Keep going. Be like, Ma, I'm home.
Yeah.
Eat loaf. Let's do some yoga.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What years were you there? Maybe we were there at the same time.
Oh God. That was 06, 07.
Oh, okay. I was 11 to 13.
Okay. So I was 06, 07. 06, 07. Yeah. And then I think when I was when I came back out West, I was like 08 to 2009. And then from 9 to 12, I was back at the University of Maryland College Park coaching wrestling. So,
right.
And then at some point, jobs in between, policy changes, LGBT advocacy, the juggernaut list, working with the NFL,
That's cool. See, you said your arrows point in the same direction.
I feel like they all do. It's like, it was all sports related for a long period of time. Like everything was like sports. sports law.
Yeah.
Now we're just going to go over here to public policy and healthcare reform and working with the late great Elijah Cummings, like those sort of things are just like all part of like a narrative. But when it comes down to it, it's like I was pointing in at least a general direction.
I see. Yeah.
I feel as though like when I remember I saw you doing some of your acrobatics on like one of those wheels hanging from the sky.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this girl's crazy. Like, what if that thing, like all I could think of was Owen Hart. Like, what if that thing just breaks and she falls? Is she going to get hurt?
Yeah.
And I was like, is there a net underneath of her?
Yeah, there should be a mat, but there isn't always.
Oh,
so that's, yeah. I tend not to go very high, which is on purpose.
Yeah.
Like, people do go super high and it's very dangerous, but I'm too much of a wimp for that.
But at least you're still twirling. And here you are, in your 30s, holding and doing things that like my hip just keeps saying, don't do that. Why would you do that? Why would you pull yourself off a perfectly good floor?
Right.
Like,
right.
My feet are on this thing for a reason. You're like going to, what made you want to go do that?
To quote the great Philip Glass, it was desperation. It was when I was in grad school and I was feeling horrible about myself. Someone asked him why he left, traditional classical music, and he said desperation. Yes. So I'm very wannabe in that way. But I was in grad school. I was on the synchronized swimming team for the University of Michigan for 2 years until they were like, "You're too old. You're a grad student. This is a college sport. Go away." And so then I tried yoga and I was doing dance. I tried figure skating. I was incredibly bad at it. And then I literally just found this place called the Detroit Fly House. And I was like, that's what I need to do. And so I drove out there on some Sunday and walked into a room and it was all these people just hanging from trapezes, and the circle that you're describing is called a lyra or an aerial hoop or like aerial silks, which you see a lot in like Cirque du Soleil stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, you're allowed to do this? This is awesome. Like it's like climbing on a jungle gym for adults in a way that isn't creepy, And it totally kept me sane. It was the only thing I was good at in grad school, at least is how that felt. And so every Sunday I would like rehabilitate my own self-esteem by doing that. And I tried many times since to quit, but it keeps coming back.
You're like, it's like, I keep trying to quit, but it's like a bad drug. It just keeps wanting me to come back.
Yeah.
So you know what? I think with so many people that have those kind of issues, like, like, hey, I don't feel great. I mean, because think about it, you're in a competitive program. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with people who you said you're like, I didn't want to do math and numbers, and here I am doing math and numbers, mm-hmm. as opposed to a bunch of people who were like, that's what they wanted to do.
Right. Like their parents were political scientists.
Yeah.
Born speaking in matrices and whatever else. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't. I was born to like parents that were like, hey, you passed.
Yeah.
Good boy.
Yeah.
Good girl. Like, there you go. You did good. You did good. Like,
yeah.
And because, parents that are just proud of their kids for like, hey, you walked. Congratulations. Yeah. You're like, God.
Like the bar is low.
Well, I think, is it low, or is it really just that they are accepting of whatever your successes will be?
That's true.
I think that's probably a better way. It's like your parents are like, well, whatever successes you want to have, we're proud of you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I got to remember that version, because I'm like, why didn't my parents push me harder? That's my entitled millennial take on all of that.
I don't even,
you're right.
It's like, well, they didn't have to push us harder. They just needed to like be there and like, hey, you did good. Like, did I? Because I mean, if you really think about it, you're harder on yourself than they'll ever be.
Yes, that's true.
So why should they? I mean, clearly they didn't have to push you too hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just simply said, why don't you go do it? Like, go have fun. Because I definitely know that I didn't think I was ever going to go to law school. I didn't think I was ever going to get a master's. I never thought I was going to go to college. I did not think I was going to go to college. What? If it wasn't football or wrestling, if it wasn't for that, I was like, I wasn't going to school. I grew up with dyslexia. Most people did not know that. And so when you're very dyslexic, you have this like terrible social anxiety things because you're like trying to fit in, knowing that like, you're like, I don't know what that word is.
Yeah. And probably trying to hide it and act like you, but was it diagnosed early on, or did you spend a lot of time being like, why can't I get this?
Yeah, so it was a lot of why can't you get this? And as we all know, Black parents are always like more hesitant. If we look at data and statistics, folks, this is true. Black parents are more hesitant to have their kids labeled in the 90s because it would put them on what they called tracks, educational tracks. And so if you put a kid in an educational track, it was normally like, hey, this kid's going to be in remedial classes so that they can get a job as a mechanic when they graduate.
Yep.
This was what they would do in the 90s. So as opposed to that, my mom just said, well, you'll just sit your ass down here and we'll just learn this stuff, get through it. And it's pushing children to like learn, but at the same time, like there's really strange like social interactions that they have because they don't understand how to be social because they have something that is prohibiting them from being social. So, and there's enough about me and my good Lord, how did you do that?
Oh, no, it's interesting. I mean, as you're saying, I was like, well, there is a political science term for that, which is path dependence, which is basically like once you get stuck on a path towards something, you kind of can't get out of it. So it sounds like your mother you worked incredibly hard to not. And frankly, that's the kind of bias that generates biased data that says, oh, well, all the I'm going to oversimplify, but like all the Black students in the town of Frederick, Maryland ended up in this career path. So that must be what they're interested in. No, that's the one that you put everyone in, right? Yeah. And so the fact that the data, our inferences around the data and what gave rise, the data generating process that gave rise to that data is hugely important. And in this case, it sounds like it's path dependence, given a whole bunch of racism, right?
Path dependence based off of racism. Yep. Yes, I would affirm that. But at the same time, I think that there are just so many opportunities that have yet to be unpacked for young people in different career fields. I have more nieces than I have nephews. And so I always tell people, I'm like, I'm worried about all my nieces having the same opportunities as me as a male. And they're like, well, why do you worry about that? I go, well, because I know that they don't. Like, I know that they'll have opportunities that me as a male, I'll never get, but also most of those opportunities are based off of like extreme sexism. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, she'll be great at development or, like fundraising. And you're just like, yeah, but she wants to be, like one of my nieces wants to be, what do they call those people?
Astronaut? Pilot?
Thank you. Astronaut, she wants to be an astronaut. Yeah. And she's like, awesome. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be in the sciences. And I go, awesome. And then her mother's like, yeah, but it's just be really tough. And it's like, so what? Right. Like, I know that they would be more accepting, but I was like, well, at least she's short. Yeah. So if she's short, she can become an astronaut. Because if she would have had my height, they'd be like, no, you can't come into the Air Force. You're too big for the plane. Yeah, we can't afford the fuel or the space or the whatever. Yeah, it's so random. It's like, but those are biased situations too. Like, are more people that are smaller people, more inclined to be pilots? No, smaller people just happen to be tracked to be pilots because it's cheaper for the employer to have, a configured space that would save on jet fuel as opposed to my 6'4", 300 and never tail in it. So, and same with you. I mean, I think as a professor, you notice that the majority of students that are probably in your classes are probably males. Almost, it's overwhelming how many are males and from the computer sciences or various other sort of STEM, maybe business disciplines. Like when I started this course, my goal, Data Science for Everyone, the name Everyone is very deliberate because my goal was to do my teeny tiny part to hopefully combat a lot of these stereotypes where when we think about data science, we think of sort of like the Mr. Robot style programmer hacker who just like can't even make eye contact with anybody. And I was like, what we need in data science and analytics and all these things are people who are creative, who are imaginative, who are experts in things like social justice or policy or, substantive areas of climate change, people who can really lend expertise to the data and the programs. And so I designed the course for everybody. And so I wanted arts majors and musicians and painters and like lit people. And I got dudes in computer science. I got more dudes in computer science that just wanted to argue with me about how they learned this somewhere else.
Well, exactly. And it's people who will just sit totally checked out while we talk about things like causal inference and research design and bias in data and measurement, which is a huge field. How do we turn the world into data in the first place? Well, we measure it. How do we measure things? Well, we do that based on our ideas about what's important and what matters. And I talk about all this. We talk about ethics, we talk about this, we talk about that. And all they ever do is sit there blankly. And then when I talk about programming, they'll raise their hand and ask some like chest thumping programming question that's not at all related, but just to show off. They're like, would this be the same, in Python? Would you do the other? But you're just like, shut up, man. That's not what we're here to talk about.
It's like, yeah. Oh, they wanted to talk about Python and Solidity. They didn't want to talk about C++. They were like, okay, so when we were talking about, how you get that data into this point, you're still not getting it.
Right.
So I do have a question for you.
Okay.
And I know that there's a lot of people that, follow MIT kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with like deep learning?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain? I have explained deep learning to the smartest people.
Okay.
And they have said, good job, Akil. You gave it your all. Could you explain deep learning to my audience who is so common layman? Okay. Because deep learning to us is like, I figured it out, but I had to watch like 19 hours of videos from MIT.
Yep.
Legit 19 freaking hours. I watched videos from MIT to understand what deep learning was. And when I got it, it was like on like hour 15. I was like, yes,
that's it.
Now, how do I explain this to other people? Can you explain deep learning to my audience?
Let's see. I will try. I will necessarily, oversimplify unless you want to do the full 15 hours. But
no. Just like oversimplify because it's like,
yes. So the one thing I will say in defense of your audience is that the term deep learning is wildly misused. Like my boyfriend and I were watching basketball last night, and every other ad was like IBM's insights and deep learning are making market predictions and and you're just like, these is just buzzwords to sound smart. There's no way any of this is actually deep learning, or if it is, it's not the key piece of whatever's going on. So it's we're made to be intimidated by design because it sounds impressive. So what's deep learning? So deep learning is basically nested machine learning. And machine learning is taking a whole bunch of data, and there's two types of machine learning, but generally supervised machine learning is I have a whole bunch of data like descriptions of types of employees, we'll keep the same kind of examples, and outcomes, their salary, their promotions, their field, their function in the company that they went into, their success, whatever, right? And I say, okay, I have all these X variables and my Y variable, my outcome. Machine learning just says, now I'm going to give you a whole bunch more X variables and no Y outcomes, and you're going to tell me what those Y outcomes are. That's what machine learning is, supervised machine learning. Deep learning is taking that, we have the X and the Y, and doing it one level deeper, which is to say, now I have some X's, I'm going to predict some Y's, and these new Y's are now my new X's for my Y's in the future. So it's just machine learning predicting new, what we call features, to predict labels. And then those new labels become features for something else. How did I do? Did that make sense?
No. I mean, somebody's going to get it.
Somebody's going to get it.
Somebody will get it. Listen, I like I said, when I figured it out, I basically was able to tell people, and I sounded like the smartest dumb guy in the room. And and they were so proud of me. Like, let me tell you, I was at Bitcoin 2022. Shout out to my people at Bitcoin Magazine and the Bitcoin conference. They were so proud of me. They said, Akil, man, somebody finally understands us. And I just simply looked at them and I said, no, I still don't understand you. I just understand what those 15 and a half hours taught me.
Right.
And I had to confirm with another 3 hours of watching. So that's the only reason why I even pretend to know.
Right.
But I appreciate you taking the time to help us with that question and to like educate people, because it is important. What we do here at Gokhshtein Media, G Media, is we provide information to people for free. That's right, folks. No charge. Professor Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy is giving you guys this for free. But we definitely want to thank you for doing that. As I start wrapping this up, because obviously it is a great day. We're filming this on a holiday, so we definitely had the time to do this. Give me, we call this the big three in me, and we normally talk about crypto, blockchain technology. Are you even into cryptocurrencies?
Somewhat. And I'm not at liberty to give too many details, but I've worked in the crypto space as a consultant, actually.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I've signed a lot of NDAs though. So I'm like, as I was coming in, I was like, oh, I really want to talk about this stuff. I was like, ugh.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
At some point, I'm sure they will fall off. I can read your NDAs and just be like, well, just giving you some basic legal information. This. Well,
that's it. I'll hire you to be my lawyer when they come after me. That's what's going to happen.
Oh, don't hire me. You'll definitely probably lose. It's what they say, the person, it's like he has a fool for a client. Don't. But I can definitely give you some opinions, but no.
There we go. Yeah.
But definitely want to say that I believe that crypto blockchain technology is the wave of the future. And because you can't talk about too much, do you feel that sentiment is actually something that is truly like the truth? Like, it's not about sound money or breaking the environment. It's about creating easier access to finances.
Yes. I feel, my personal view is I feel very excited about all of that. And I generally think that people conflate, your audience certainly does not, but conflate blockchain technology and Dogecoin freakouts. And those are two very different things. Like, one is, human emotion running away with itself, and a lot of economic inequality and all kinds of other messy things going on that cause us to sort of pin hopes on those things. But blockchain technology, I think, is extremely promising, and not just in the crypto context. And I absolutely 100% agree. And I'm very excited about the idea of, increasing accessibility of financial services and financial activities to everybody, and decentralizing and all the sort of good things about it. I feel very strongly about from like a social and equity point of view is one of the things I'm excited about.
All right, folks. So this is why I had to have somebody that understood the whole ecosystem, as opposed to people just like me who are just like, because I'll get called a moon boy.
Oh,
I'll get called
it's a catchy name, but yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not. Like, I am definitely not a moon boy. I am like, I'm a pragmatist. I'm like, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense.
Yeah.
And I'm not a huge capitalist. I'm more of the lines of like, I'm just practical. Financially, if this makes sense for you and I both to be involved in it, and it creates a new system.
Yep.
And that's the big thing that I'm big on, is it's creating a new system, one in which will not look at my skin color or my sex or my gender, because they are different things, folks. Just to understand your sex and your gender, it's in the dictionary. They're just different. So start understanding why it all matters. Then eventually my ability to harness the power of DeFi or economics, economics will be, or just in economics in general, would be increased. So now my nieces and my nephews won't have to go through an application process where they have to show, their race, their color, their income. It's more like, do you own Bitcoin?
Yeah.
It's like, that's it.
And it's literally the whole point is that they don't know who you are. It's literally the only piece of information is what you own.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah, I can show you I own Bitcoin and I own other physical assets, and I don't have to give you everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's ownership of your own data.
There's a really good, you're reminding me of an article, maybe you already know it, maybe your listeners already know it. It's a ProPublica article from a few years ago that went through not bank loan applications, but the dynamics are exactly the same, but parole decisions that a number of prison systems were using to decide whether someone should be released for parole or not. And it turned out the outcomes were incredibly biased, and white people versus black people with very, very similar crimes, white people were getting out for parole and black people were not. And ProPublica did this great study where they said, well, even if you remove the race variables from this algorithm that these people were using to decide parole, the other variables basically triangulated around race. So they were like zip code of where you're from, income, previous crimes, by the way, because Black people are more likely to be arrested for the same exact crimes, right? And so it was even replicating the biases, even if you removed the race variable. And what you're describing in terms of like, am I going to give you a loan? Am I going to give you a credit card? Am I going to give you a mortgage? It's exactly the same thing. And I think you're absolutely right that blockchain technology is a way totally past, because you strip all of that out. Yeah. Right. So if people come back to you and say, well, what if we take away race, gender, and sex variables and maybe age? I don't know what else we could put in. Then we would get rid of bias. Like, actually, we probably wouldn't.
No, it's like zip code.
So many other things, zip codes, health outcomes.
Yeah, but if I show you like I have 2 Bitcoin in my account and leverage that against my loan that I'm applying for, guess what? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Like you just know that I own Bitcoin, or I've got 3 Bored Apes in my wallet. Like these are the things that I can show you and that I choose to show you, as opposed to right now when we go for a loan. I mean, let's take it. You know, we're probably, although we're on opposite ends of the country, we're in some of the highest market values for housing.
Yes.
Housing
untouchable. It's insane.
Yeah, it's untouchable. Like it's ridiculous. Like I told people, I was like, I own 2-row homes and like 3 cars in Baltimore for the same price I purchased my 2-story condo for. Yeah. Like you're just like, what? Like, yeah, exactly. It's that expensive. Like you in New York, you're like, purchase. Like,
yeah, exactly. I was like, good for you, man.
You're like, I'm looking to find an apartment.
I'm in my kitchen, living room, dining room, office room right now. And it's one of 2 rooms in my whole apartment, and my boyfriend and I both work full time. So anyway, yes.
Yeah. But then again, it's
I gotta get out of here.
Okay.
No, I gotta get out of New York. That's what I mean. Yeah. No, I'll stay and talk to you all day. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I was like, at least go to Portland,
Yeah, and even in Portland, I mean, you could definitely, because Portland State University right here, they've got a computer science and data analytics program. And they also, I think that anyway, listen, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because my fan base is going to be like, Akil, you ended up talking about things that we definitely didn't care about. Right. So Andrea, I always give my guests the last opportunity to, just say whatever they're thinking, things that they find important. I will not ask you about your big 3 because, you've got too many NDAs and I don't want to say, hey, what
does big 3 mean?
So the big 3, so there are 2 different avenues. So the big 3 here is crypto, competition, and culture. We've covered those. That's the big 3. But then at the end, I asked my people, the guests, what their big 3s are. And it's in terms of cryptocurrencies. And if they like something. So like for me, I always tell people like minus Bitcoin and Ethereum, my big 3 are it's like VeChain, Omi Coin, and let's say Immutable X. Like, so I'm big into gamification. I believe that games, like video games where kids are playing today, that's going to be the future, right? Because I don't play video games, but they do. And guess what? Where kids go, my money goes. Yep. So I always tell folks, if you've got a big 3, you can share, but
Yeah. I will say, I don't know if this is fair, but I'm going to hop on your gamification. I don't have a specific, but I like gamification. I like, this is so ridiculous. This is going to ruin my reputation among all your listeners, but I got very excited, more puzzled by crypto kitties like 5 years ago. Do you remember those?
Lord. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the Beanie Babies of crypto. I think they're ridiculous and I think they're a joke, but I was very interested in the sociological forces that gave rise to that. And it sent me on a deep end of like, off the deep end of like, why do people like Beanie Babies? Why do we get collectibles? The NFTs are sort of the new version of that. And so I say that just because it's a topic of fascination. I think they're terrible, but it interests me how we ascribe value to something that is clearly not valuable in any way. And so from a sociological, political perspective, I would put that. And then I think my third one is, I don't know how you feel about this, but I like when random people just start their own coins. I'm thinking like weed coin, something ridiculous, right? Just because I think that's sort of fun. And there's something to be said about having like, even Dogecoin, it's stupid, but having something fun in it could get other people engaged in the crypto world. And that's kind of what CryptoKitties originally were supposed to do as well, but then we all freaked out. So those aren't actually a big three, but those are like a taking up space in my brain three.
So those are more of the social, economic, and kind of like transformative things that you're looking at in the crypto industry. And I will accept those big three as the truth. And so with that being said, Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy, thank you for joining us here on The Big Three Me, powered by G Media. And remember, folks, if someone hasn't told you they love you, remember that I just did. Have a great day and an even better tomorrow.